Number 1.
I grew up in a small town in the Pacific Northwest, population around 3,000. I was around 10 years old at the time. Late one night, we were getting home from the city and my mother needed to stop by the grocery store. Back then, it wasn't unusual for the kids to be left in the car while their parents ran in. I was sitting in the back seat while the car was running, listening to the radio. The parking lot is almost deserted and it's very dark. Few seconds go by when I heard and felt my door try to open, but it was locked. I looked out the window and there was a tall, blonde man just staring back at me. I was terrified. I saw him look at the driver's door and I quickly reached over to lock it. Then I locked the other doors. Through the glass, he smiled the creepiest smile I've ever seen, almost a snarl. He said that he knew my mother and that she agreed to give him a ride home and to let him in. In all honesty, that sounded like something my mum would say, but I just yelled through the glass that I'd wait for my mum before I unlocked the door. Then he said,
"Okay, but can you at least roll down the window so I can put my bags in?"
I saw no bags. Even at 10 years old, I wasn't stupid enough to fall for this. I shook my head and said, "Sorry, wait for my mum." His smile then turned to absolute anger. Luckily for me, an employee was out gathering shopping carts. Since it was such a small town, he knew my car and ran over. The guy immediately ran away really fast into the woods that were between the store and the highway. I started crying, and the employee asked if I wanted to come into the store. I was too scared, so I said I just wanted to wait for my mum. He stayed next to the car until she came out and told her what happened. Then they called the police and they asked me a bunch of questions, but I'd never seen the man before, and fortunately that was the last time. I'm so thankful for the employee of the store. He probably saved my life.
Number 2.
When I was 14 years old, I was waiting in a parking lot in my mother's truck. She was at her doctor's office, and I had opted to stay behind to read in the back seat. Luckily for me, I was slightly paranoid as a child, and I locked all the doors. About 10 minutes after my mother went upstairs, her station wagon pulled into the lot and screeched to a stop right behind my truck, literally parked across the rear of the truck, blocking it. Out of the station wagon came a grey-haired old man. He quickly came to my door and grabbed the handle. He never made eye contact with me though. I froze in place. I felt like I couldn't do anything. He started shaking the handle violently and pulling on the door. It was an old truck, so the door moved quite a bit. I was scared, thinking that the lock would fail or something. It was then that I remembered my mother had left her dead cell phone in the front seat. I grabbed the phone and made a show of pretending to make a call, and the man looked up at me, then ran back to his car and took off. When my mother returned, she took me to the police station and I gave them a description of the man and the car. They promised to call if they heard anything. About a week later, an officer called and informed us that the man had been caught. Apparently, he tried to get two 7-year-old twin boys into his car, and their father had seen it all. The father ran up to the man and hit him with a baseball bat while screaming at him to stay away from his kids. After the initial hit, he grabbed onto the guy and had a passerby call the police. I'm still glad to this day I had locked the doors of that truck. I was scared of staying behind alone in cars for a long time after that.
Number 3.
Let me preface this by saying that I grew up in a very safe area. Play outside with no parental supervision? Sure, let's go exploring in the woods. Walk your dog alone at 2 a.m. All good, safe. I had recently turned 16 and was reveling in the freedom of being a newly licensed driver. After one of my soccer games, I made a spur-of-the-moment decision to swing by the mall on my way home, just because I could. It was early in the fall, so when I got there, it was still fairly light outside. I parked far from the entrance, still a little nervous about parking next to other cars. I can't remember what I bought though. I can't remember if I bought anything at all. I may have just wandered around aimlessly for a while. Teenagers are weird, I guess. Whatever the case, I know that by the time I was walking out the door, it was well past dusk. I know now that I was stupidly overconfident. There were almost no cars left in the parking lot at that point. Few more goers were enthusiastic enough to stay until 9 PM on a Monday night. I began the long walk to my car by myself. Walking down the aisle, thinking about all the homework that I still had to do, it took me a while to notice that there was a car behind me. I probably would have noticed it sooner if the headlights had been on. Still, I thought nothing of it. I was walking rather close to the center of the aisle than I needed to be, so I assumed the car just didn't have enough space to get by me and graciously moved over. The car didn't pass me though. The driver continued at my walking pace of less than 3 miles per hour, following me. Okay, maybe he's looking for a parking spot, except that he keeps passing empty spot after empty spot. Something clicked. I finally realized that this was super weird. I was afraid to turn around, to go back and try to find more security, because this creepy car was directly in my way. In my mind, my best option was continue walking as though I didn't realize anything was weird, get to my car, and just get the hell out of there. I kept walking, but I moved my keys between my fingers and made a fist, in case I needed to punch someone or something. I've never punched somebody in my life. I waited as long as possible before pressing the unlock button for my car, so the creepy car guy wouldn't know where my car was parked. I kept trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. Finally, I'm about 2 feet from my car. I hit the unlock button and my lights flash, giving me away. The creepy car immediately zooms into the spot directly next to mine, on the passenger side of the car. I'm in the car, I'm closing my door as his door opens, and out of nowhere a hand reaches out, and I don't put my seatbelt on, I don't check that there is no one coming, I don't turn my headlights on, my key is in the ignition before I know it, and I'm out of that spot so quickly I think the rubber trail is still there. It's been several years since that incident. I no longer live in such a safe place. Still, after 6 years in a big city, I don't think I've ever felt quite as creeped out as I did that night.
Number 4.
It was the summer of 1992, and I was 20 years old. I had just completed my junior year of college, and I was staying in the same city as the campus to take some summer classes. I also worked at a couple of part-time jobs to handle living expenses. One of my jobs was a food delivery guy. We cooked and delivered steaks, chicken, and burgers instead of the usual pizza or Asian food. One night, after completing my shift, I was bored and for laughs decided to check out an adult movie and novelty store that I had seen sometimes in the course of all my driving for that job. I parked amongst several other cars and got out of my car to go into the store. I saw a middle-aged man with a pasty appearance, with greasy dark hair and a receding hairline in the car parked closest to the store. I approached the car on the way in and he raised his hand, hello, to me. Not wanting to be rude, I raised my hand in return. As I walked directly by the driver's side door, he said,
Hey.
Hello, I said in return. He leaned his head out of his window and said,
You want to get it off?
Taken aback, I replied, no, and hurried into the store. I browsed about and, put off by the sheer seediness of the place, quickly left. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the car and his car in a different parking space. I got into my car and started out of the parking lot. As I got to the road, I saw the guy start his car and start to come out as well. Hoping this was a coincidence, I turned out of the parking lot to go home. It wasn't coincidence. Suddenly, this guy was following me very closely and blinking his high beams at me every few blocks. I tried to lose him at some traffic signals, but was unsuccessful. I decided to go an alternate route at that point, not wanting to direct this creep to where I was living. Luckily, my delivery job had made me familiar with a lot of these roads in the city. I headed for a particular neighborhood, turned in, and took as complicated a route as I could, as quickly as I could, and finally lost him in there. I thought that was the end of it. A few weeks later, during work at the takeout place, I stopped at a convenience store in the course of a delivery to get a soda. After I checked out, I saw the same guy. He smiled and raised his hand hello again. I hurried outside to my car, but this time I was in my shirt and hat from the takeout place. Now he knew where I worked. By the time I left the convenience store, he was following me again. Fortunately though, I was able to lose him again, but spent the rest of the summer afraid to see him pop up at my place of work, or worse, order food and bring me to his house. Thankfully, that did not happen.
Number 5.
The story you're about to hear is definitely not of the paranormal, so this is a true experience and it scared the crap out of me. Back 3 or 4 years ago, I was a happy student, and like many other students, I liked to party a lot. 5 minutes from the school that I went to, there was a popular bar that everybody I knew liked to go to. One night, it was settled that my friends and I were going to have a few drinks there. I lived not too far away from the school and the bar, so I decided I'd go there on my bicycle. Since there was nothing in front of the bar that I could attach and lock my bike to, I left it on the west side of the school, where there was a bicycle rack. Well, the evening went by pretty smoothly, and at midnight I decided to call it a night, since I had some studying to do the next day. I left the bar and started walking in the small street in front, where one of the back entrances of the school's parking lot was. Now, to give you a bit of context, the school is in a T shape. There is a parking lot on the east side, one in front and one on the west side, where my bike was. Right next to the school on the right, there is a town's museum with a flight of concrete stairs on its side. It's like 4 steps up, a flat area to the door, and then 4 steps down. The space between these stairs and the east wall of the school is narrow, just wide enough for a car to go through. So, I was walking in the street and I entered the east parking lot from the back. Since there's no entrance to the west parking from that street, I decided to go around the front to get to where my bike was. Upon walking into the parking lot, I spotted a lonely car there, all lights out, right in the angle of the T. I thought, hey, no problem, the guy probably just wanted a place to smoke his joint in peace. I continued walking, and at the exact same time I passed in front of the car, still a good few yards away, I heard its engine start, and I saw its lights come on. I thought again, hey, whatever, the guy's done smoking and he's leaving now. But there was this uneasiness that crept over me, and I instinctively started walking on the median's grass, just to make it harder for him to get to me or something, I guess. Just as I arrived at the narrow space between the school's east wall and the museum stairs, I heard the car coming towards me from behind. It was coming closer and closer, until it was driving right next to me, but then it stopped. I, of course, turned around to get a look at it. All I managed to see from the male driver is that he was wearing a cap, and he had mid-length curly hair. The rest of his face was cast in shadows, and he had his right arm resting upon the passenger seat. He was staring right at me, not moving a muscle. After a few seconds of him just staring and not budging, my heart started racing. I was thinking, what the hell does he want? Why is he not moving? But I turned around and decided to ignore him and continue walking. The thing is, now he's blocking the way to the north parking lot. Unless I walked right in front of his bumper, which I really didn't feel was a good idea. I figured I would take the museum stairs and make a left when I'd get to their end. That way I wouldn't have to cross so close to the car. So I began climbing up the steps, and I heard the car starting to drive again. I was thinking, thank God, when, as I got to the bottom of the stairs, it stopped right there in front of me, blocking my way once more, and the guy still was in the same position, still not moving an inch. My heart sank. I really didn't know how to react. Should I go down the stairs and continue on my way like nothing happened, or should I turn around and just run? I thought of too many things at once. In the end, all I could do was shrug at him, like nothing ever happened, and then I walked down the stairs and turned left, maybe 2 inches away from the passenger's door. I was shaking, and I felt that something bad was about to happen. All he had to do was to drive to the street in front and come back via the north entrance of the parking lot, and then again I would find my path blocked once more. I started fumbling in the bottom of my purse to get my cell phone and dialed 911, just not pressed the call button yet. I figured that if he came back, I would only have to press one button and the police would be on the line, and if not, well, I wouldn't really need to call them anymore. I finished pressing 911 and I took a look around to see where the car was at. I was in the middle of the front parking space, and when I turned my head to the right to look, I saw the car driving on the street, coming towards the entrance of the parking lot. All that was going through my mind was, oh no, please. And then I turned my head a little further, and then what I did see, well, I saw a police car with policemen just doing their routine tour of the town. I was so relieved. That was my cue. I ran to the other side of the school, grabbed my bike, and pedaled like never before, until I was safe and sound at home. Looking back, there are some things I would do differently. I would call out to the police car. I would also run out to the parking lot to find a space to go where the car wouldn't be able to drive through. But anyways, what's done is done, and that was just a terrifying, all-round creepy experience I've had.
Number 6.
A few years ago, it was a Friday. I was off work at lunchtime and was looking forward to the weekend. I commute 40 miles to work, so I did not feel like waiting till I got home to have lunch. So I decided to go to a chain grocery and get a sandwich, and since it was a beautiful autumn day, sunny but the air was crisp and cool, I was going to sit in my car, eat my sandwich, drink my Coke, and enjoy a new book I had just purchased recently. I parked near the back of the parking lot, and after getting my food and returning to my car, I opened my car door. I was not too concerned or worried about anyone bothering me, since this city has a low crime rate and this grocery store was in a good neighborhood, but I still would frequently look in my mirrors and kind of glance around, just to be on the safe side. I had just done a quick scan around the parking lot and did not see anyone, and upon returning my attention to my book, I heard a male voice say,
"Excuse me, miss."
I looked up, and there was a guy standing there. He was standing at the end of my open car door, and it gave me a weird vibe, because, as I said, I just scanned the parking lot and had not seen anyone. My first assumption was that he was homeless, and I was expecting him to ask for spare change. I have been approached by homeless people before, and have never had a problem with any of them. Anyway, this guy was pretty big, chubby, but muscular too. He looked like he could be on a football team. He was probably just under 6 foot, 20-something, blonde hair to his shoulders, and looked a little scruffy and unkempt, and he wore a backpack. He said words to the effect,
"My father just died in Kentucky. Someone told me there is a rescue mission over on Tennessee Street, and they would buy me a bus ticket to get home."
Just to clarify, I'm in Florida, and the city I was in has streets named after states. I assumed he was asking me for directions, so I replied that Tennessee Street was only about a half a mile over. I then pointed that way and gave him directions and explained that I was not real familiar with that area. I didn't know where the actual place he was looking for was, but the street I did know. I assumed he would then leave, but he didn't. He repeated the same spiel again, about his father dead, free bus ticket, rescue mission, etc. And I found myself repeating the directions and once again how I was unfamiliar with that area. After our second verbal dance, it began to dawn on me that he was dropping a major hint that he wanted me to offer him a ride over to Tennessee Street. I was not meaning to be uncaring in any way, form or shape, but I don't give rides to strangers. Well, he repeated himself a third time, and while I again found myself repeating the directions for him, I noticed his jaw tensed, his eyes narrowed, and he began to take a threatening stance. He was becoming angry and hostile. I quickly looked around, and the only people in the parking lot was an elderly lady and a bag boy gathering the grocery carts, and they were both several lanes over and towards the front, and I was near the back of the parking lot. It was just me and this guy, who was obviously having a serious problem with me, that I was not taking the bait and offering him a ride. For reference, I'm a female, 5'4" and 140 pounds. He had some pounds, height and muscle on me, and it suddenly dawned on my naive small town girl self that he could just shove me over and get in my car with me, and I might not be able to get away. My keys were in the bottom of my purse, and my driver's side door had a broke lock, so staying in the car or just shutting the door real quick and leaving was not an option. Before things could go further, I made my decision. I was not going to be trapped in my car. I quickly grabbed my purse, jumped out, and got on the other side of my car before he even had time to think about it, and being the sweet southern girl I am, I turned to face him as I backed away and told him I was sorry to hear about his father and wished him well, but I just remembered something I needed to buy in the store. I turned and did not walk, but ran back into the store. I made sure to come out when there were plenty of people in the parking lot, and he was not there, and I have not seen him since that day. He did frighten me. He was obviously not going to go away. Then, there was the issue of him becoming angry with me, which in itself was scary. The whole time he and I were talking, I could not understand why he did not just go ask someone else for a ride, but he seemed determined that it was going to be me. Since that day, I'm a lot more careful and really don't sit in my car in a parking lot and read anymore.
Hey guys, it's the Grim Reader here. I hope you enjoyed listening through that. If you did, please slap a like, and if you haven't already, why not subscribe to be notified of future uploads? If you have a story you want me to narrate, please send it to my email in the description box. Once again, thanks a lot for listening.